A dying girl gave a silent signal to a police dog. What happened next made the whole world cry. One small gesture, almost invisible, sets a veteran K9 handler and his loyal dog on a trail that nobody else can see. Alone and dismissed by the authorities, he uncovers whispers of a hidden network, a family with power, and secrets too dangerous to confront, yet impossible to ignore. As he digs deeper, the stakes explode. Every move is watched, every step could be deadly, and even his own daughter becomes entwined in a game that threatens to destroy them both. But the truth is, stranger than anyone imagined, the girl's final act was no accident. It was a signal, a carefully planned message that could unravel a system built on lies, corruption, and betrayal. Now, with time running out and danger closing in, can a man, his daughter, and a dog bring justice to the powerless? Or will the silent signal be buried forever, along with the girl's last hope? What will it take to expose the hidden evil before it's too late? The night air felt heavy with the acrid smell of burned rubber and scorched metal. Cassian Rourke's police cruiser rolled to a stop on the darkened stretch of interstate, his headlights cutting through wisps of lingering smoke. The emergency lights painted everything in alternating red and blue, creating eerie shadows that danced across the asphalt. Argos, his German shepherd partner, stood alert in the back seat, ears forward and nose twitching. The dog's muscular frame tensed as Cassian opened the door, letting him out onto the scene. "Easy, boy," Cassian murmured, scanning the area. Debris littered the road, shattered glass, twisted metal, and dark stains that made his stomach clench. The beam of his flashlight swept across the ground, catching movement under a blue tarp about 20 yards ahead. His radio crackled. "Paramedics are 10 minutes out, Rourke." "Copy that," he responded, already moving forward with Argos at his side. "I've got movement here. Possible victim." As they approached, Cassian heard labored breathing. Carefully lifting the edge of the tarp, he revealed a teenage girl, no more than 16. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her face streaked with soot. But it was her eyes that hit him hardest, wide with fear and desperation, yet somehow determined. "Help's coming," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Just hold on." Argos whined softly, moving closer to the girl. Despite her obvious pain, she lifted a trembling hand toward the dog. Cassian watched as she placed her palm against Argos's thick black fur, her fingers finding a spot just behind his ear. 3 distinct taps, deliberate, purposeful. The change in Argos was immediate. The German shepherd went rigid, a low whimper escaping his throat. Before Cassian could process what was happening, Argos bolted away from them, heading toward a shadowy embankment off the road. "Argos!" Cassian called out, torn between staying with the injured girl and following his partner. The girl's hand fell limply to her side, and he noticed something clutched in her other fingers, a small digital recorder, its surface smeared with blood. "Stay with me," he urged the girl, but her eyes were beginning to glaze over. In the distance, he could hear approaching sirens, but they felt too far away. The girl's chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Argos's urgent barking drew his attention back to the embankment. Years of working with his canine partner had taught him to trust the dog's instincts. "I'll be right back," he promised the girl, quickly radioing his position to the incoming paramedics. Following Argos's barks, Cassian scrambled down the slope, his flashlight beam revealing a disturbing sight. A trail of blood droplets led into the shadows, partially hidden by tall grass and debris. Fresh tire tracks cut through the soft earth, telling a story of a hasty departure. "What did you find, boy?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. Argos paced anxiously, nose to the ground, following an invisible trail that only he could detect. The wail of sirens grew louder as Cassian quickly documented the scene with his phone's camera. When he rushed back to the girl, the paramedics were just pulling up, their vehicles flooding the area with harsh white light. "Over here!" he shouted, dropping to his knees beside her. But as the medical team swarmed around them with equipment and urgent voices, Cassian could see it was too late. The girl's eyes stared sightlessly at the night sky, whatever secret she'd tried to share dying with her. Argos returned to his side, pressing against his leg with a mournful whine. Cassian's hand found the dog's fur, fingers absently rubbing the spot where the girl had tapped her final message. The digital recorder felt heavy in his other hand, its presence a silent testimony to whatever horror had brought her to this lonely stretch of road. "She was trying to tell us something," he said quietly to Argos, watching as the paramedics confirmed what he already knew. The dog's dark eyes met his, filled with an understanding that went beyond training. That subtle gesture, 3 taps behind the ear, hadn't been random. It had meant something important enough for a dying girl to use her last moments to communicate. As the crime scene unit arrived and the interstate transformed into a blur of activity, Cassian couldn't shake the image of those determined eyes, that deliberate touch. He'd seen enough in his years on the force to know when something wasn't right, and everything about this scene screamed of darker purposes. "Sir?" A young officer approached him. "The detectives are asking for your initial report." Cassian nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. Whatever this girl had been involved in, whatever she'd been trying to expose, it had cost her life. Her last act had been to pass on a message, not in words, but through Argos. Now it was up to him to figure out what it meant. The digital recorder weighed heavily in his pocket as he made his way toward the detective's car, Argos following faithfully at his heels. Around them, the night continued to pulse with emergency lights, but Cassian felt the darkness closing in, knowing that somewhere out there, someone had thought this girl's death would bury their secrets. They had underestimated her final act of defiance, 3 simple taps that would set in motion events they could never have predicted. As Cassian prepared to give his report, he silently promised the nameless girl that her message, whatever it was, would not be lost. Back at the precinct, Cassian sat at his desk, turning the blood-stained digital recorder over in his hands. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as most officers had gone home for the night. Argos lay at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to watch his partner's movements. "Let's see what you've got," Cassian muttered, pressing play. Static crackled through the tiny speaker, followed by whispered voices. Most of it was unintelligible, but certain phrases cut through clearly. "Shipment coming through Cedar Grove. Martinez needs the paperwork clean. Girls arrive Thursday." Cassian's stomach tightened. He grabbed a notepad and began scribbling down every name and location he could catch. Between bursts of static and muffled conversation, he picked up references to dates, amounts of money, and what sounded like code names. The recording ended with sounds of struggle and a car door slamming. Cassian rewound it 3 times, straining to catch every detail. His hands were shaking by the time he finished his notes. Walking down the hallway to Sheriff Morton's office, Cassian rehearsed how to present his findings. The sheriff was old school, resistant to anything that might disturb the peaceful image of their county. But this was too important to ignore. "Come in," Morton called out when Cassian knocked. The sheriff barely looked up from his paperwork, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Sir, about the Jane Doe from the interstate tonight," Cassian began. "I found something that needs immediate attention." He placed the recorder on Morton's desk. The sheriff glanced at it with disinterest. "The girl who ran out into traffic? Tragic accident, but pretty straightforward." "That's not what happened, sir. She was running from someone. And this recorder, it has names, locations. I think it's evidence of human trafficking." Morton took off his glasses, fixing Cassian with a tired look. Trafficking? In our county? Come on, Rourke. You've been watching too many crime shows. Just listen to it, sir. There are specific names mentioned. Someone called Martinez, something about Cedar Grove. Cedar Grove? Morton interrupted. That's Randy Martinez's shipping company. He's on the city council, for crying out loud. Are you suggesting he's involved in criminal activity? Cassian stood, his ground. I'm suggesting we need to investigate. The girl died trying to get this information to us. The girl was probably a runaway who got mixed up with drugs. These things happen. Morton pushed the recorder back across his desk. File your report about the accident and let the detectives handle any follow-up. But sir, that's all, Rourke. Go home. Get some rest. You've had a long night. Frustration burned in Cassian's chest as he left the office. The next morning he checked the local news websites. The girl's death warranted only a small paragraph on page 6. Unidentified female dies in highway incident. No mention of suspicious circumstances. No call for witnesses. He tried calling the county detective's office, but his messages went unreturned. The crime scene photos he'd taken were marked as routine evidence, filed away without follow-up. Even his fellow officers seemed eager to move on to other cases. During his lunch break, Cassian drove to the Cedar Grove Industrial Park. Randy Martinez's shipping company occupied a large warehouse at the back of the complex. Everything looked normal. Trucks coming and going, workers moving cargo. But now he noticed details that seemed off. Security cameras covering every angle, guards who looked more like private military than warehouse security. Back at his desk, Cassian created a private file on his laptop. He transcribed every word from the recorder, marking timestamps and possible connections. Names began to form patterns. Martinez, someone called the commissioner, references to processing centers and merchandise. What do you think, boy? He asked Argos, who sat alert beside him. That girl knew what she was doing when she signaled you. She knew this recorder was important. The dog's ears perked up at a sound behind them. Cassian quickly minimized his screen as Officer Chen walked by. Still obsessing over that highway accident? Chen asked, shaking her head. Let it go, man. You can't save everyone. But Cassian couldn't let it go. That night, he spread his notes across his kitchen table. The girl's final gesture kept playing in his mind. 3 deliberate taps behind Argos's ear. It hadn't been random. She'd known about police dogs, known how to signal them, which meant she'd been around law enforcement before. He started searching missing persons databases, focusing on girls who disappeared near police stations or canine training facilities. The recorder contained background sounds, too. Train whistles, industrial noises, snippets of conversation that might indicate locations. The more he dug, the more convinced he became that he'd stumbled onto something massive. The casual mention of girls in plural, the professional security at Cedar Grove, the quick dismissal by his superiors, it all pointed to an organized operation with deep local connections. Cassian looked at Argos, who hadn't left his side since that night on the highway. We're on our own with this. One, aren't we, boy? The dog's steady gaze seemed to confirm what Cassian already knew. If he wanted to uncover the truth, he'd have to work outside official channels. That girl had died trying to expose something, and her last act had been to choose him as her messenger. He couldn't fail her. He turned back to his notes, determined to piece together the puzzle she'd left behind, no matter where it led. The names and locations on the recorder were more than random details. They were threads in a dark web, one that someone had killed to keep hidden. The coffee shop sat on a quiet corner, far from the police station. Cassian chose it carefully. No security cameras, cash only, and enough background noise to mask conversation. Bishop Reyes was already there, hunched over a steaming cup, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. "Thanks for meeting me," Cassian said, sliding into the booth. He placed a paper cup of water on the table, then set his phone next to it, playing white noise. Old habits died hard with ex-detectives. Bishop nodded approvingly at the precautions. "You sounded worried on the phone. What's got you spooked?" Cassian pulled out the recorder, keeping it low. "Listen to this." He pressed play, and a man's voice emerged through earbuds they shared. "Willoughby wants the new shipment processed by Friday. Quality merchandise this time, not like the last batch." Bishop's weathered face grew still. He held up a finger, listening intently as more voices discussed distribution centers and buyer preferences. "There's more," Cassian said. "They mentioned specific locations. Cedar Grove Industrial Park, the old Martin warehouse, something called the Sanctuary." "Willoughby," Bishop repeated softly. "As in Richard Willoughby, the philanthropist?" "His company's mentioned several times, along with Martinez Shipping, the commissioner's office, even references to the police department." Bishop rubbed his temples. "Jesus, no wonder they shut you down fast." He leaned forward. "The Willoughbys practically built this town. Richard's grandfather started with real estate, then diversified. Shipping, construction, private security. They fund half the politicians in the state." "And they're involved in human trafficking?" Cassian's stomach turned. "Makes sick sense when you think about it. They've got the infrastructure, warehouses, trucks, connections at the ports, plus enough legitimate business to hide the dirty money." Bishop took a long sip of coffee. "How'd you get this recorder?" Cassian described the highway scene, the dying girl, her signal to Argos. Bishop listened without interrupting, his sharp eyes taking everything in. "Smart girl," he said finally. "She knew a K-9 officer would be harder to corrupt. Dogs can't be bought off." "But why tap behind Argos's ear? What does that mean?" "It's an old signal, not used much anymore. Some K-9 units trained dogs to react to it, meant evidence present or search required. If she knew that..." Bishop trailed off. "She must have had police connections," Cassian finished, "or been around law enforcement. Which means she could be in the system somewhere. Missing persons, juvenile records, something." Bishop pulled out a small notebook. "Give me the exact dates and locations from the recorder. I still have friends in different departments, ones I trust." They spent the next hour analyzing the audio, Bishop's trained ear catching details Cassian had missed, background sounds that suggested time of day, accents that hinted at specific neighborhoods. "The Sanctuary," Bishop mused. "That rings a bell. There was an old church complex out by the river, got converted to private property about 5 years ago. Willoughby Enterprises bought it through a shell company." "Perfect place to hide people," Cassian said grimly. "Remote, lots of small rooms, high walls. And connected to the river. Easy disposal of evidence?" Bishop's face hardened. "Listen, Cassian, this is bigger than we thought. These people, they've got judges in their pocket, cops on their payroll. One wrong move." "I know, but that girl died trying to expose them. We can't just..." "We won't," Bishop cut in. "But we do this smart. No official channels, no electronic trails. We gather evidence first, build a case they can't bury." He tore a page from his notebook. "I've got a secure landline at my place. Memorize the number, then burn this. Call only between 2 and 4 a.m. Let it ring twice, hang up, then call back." Cassian pocketed the paper. "What's our first move?" "The Sanctuary. I'll do some recon, see what security looks like. You keep working your normal shifts, don't change any patterns. But start noting which officers react weird when trafficking cases come up. Who pushes to close investigations early? Who seems to have extra money?" They finished their coffee in silence, each lost in thought. As they stood to leave, Bishop gripped Cassian's arm. One more thing. That girl, she chose you for a reason. Trusted you to finish what she started. We owe her justice, but we do it right. No heroics, no lone wolf stuff. We're in this together." Cassian nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle deeper. The girl's face flashed in his mind, her desperate determination to pass on what she knew, her courage in her final moments. "Together," he agreed. As they parted ways, he felt a mix of fear and resolve. They were just two men going up against a powerful machine of corruption. But sometimes, he thought, watching Bishop's straight-backed figure disappear around the corner, that's all it took to start bringing down an empire. Two people who refused to look the other way. Cassian adjusted his clip-on tie, feeling like an imposter in his department-issued dress uniform. The annual Willoughby Foundation Gala buzzed with activity around him, filling the restored Victorian mansion with sounds of tinkling crystal and polite laughter. He'd volunteered for the K9 security detail, positioning himself and Argos near the edge of the grand ballroom. "Good boy," he murmured, scratching behind Argos's ear. The German shepherd sat alert but calm, exactly as trained. Together they watched the city's elite mingle beneath crystal chandeliers. Richard Willoughby commanded attention at the center of the room. Tall and distinguished in his tailored tuxedo, he moved from group to group with practiced charm. "The Children's Hospital wing wouldn't exist without your generous support," Cassian overheard him say to an elderly couple. The words dripped with sincerity. Judge Marcus Howard stood nearby, his round face flushed from champagne. The judge who'd blocked 3 trafficking investigations in the past year alone. Now Cassian understood why. "Officer Rourke," Sheriff Cooper's voice made him stiffen. "Didn't expect to see you volunteering for event duty." "Thought it'd be good experience for Argos, sir." Cassian kept his tone neutral. "Crowds, unfamiliar environment." Cooper's eyes narrowed slightly. "Just keep that dog under control. These people write our budget." "Yes, sir." Cassian waited until Cooper moved away before releasing his breath. The sheriff's casual mention of money felt different now, loaded with new meaning. A server passed with a tray of appetizers. Argos's nose twitched, but he held position perfectly. Cassian rewarded him with a gentle pat. "That's my boy." "Magnificent animal." The smooth voice belonged to Richard Willoughby himself. He'd approached so quietly, Cassian hadn't noticed. "German Shepherd, correct?" "Yes, sir. This is Argos." "May I?" Willoughby extended his hand. "I wouldn't recommend it. He's working." Of course. Willoughby smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "I've always admired the K9 program. Such loyalty, such discipline. Dogs know their place in the hierarchy, don't they? Follow the chain of command." The words carried a subtle weight. Cassian forced himself to maintain eye contact. "They're trained to serve and protect, sir. That's their primary loyalty." "Indeed." Willoughby's smile tightened fractionally. "Though sometimes young officers can be overzealous in their interpretation of that duty, rush to conclusions without understanding the bigger picture." Before Cassian could respond, a commotion near the kitchen drew attention. 2 servers had collided, sending glasses crashing. Argos's ears pricked forward. "Excuse me, sir. I should check that out." Cassian moved away, grateful for the interruption. He circled the ballroom's perimeter, using the incident as cover to observe more closely. Judge Howard now huddled with Sheriff Cooper, and a man Cassian recognized as the Port Authority chief. Their faces were serious despite the festive atmosphere. Argos suddenly tensed beside him. Following the dog's gaze, Cassian spotted a side door closing behind a figure in black. Security, but not the uniformed kind hired for the event. This man moved, differently, with coiled purpose. Keeping casual, Cassian worked his way closer to the door. Voices drifted through. Willoughby's and another he didn't recognize. Shipment delayed at customs. Handle it through usual channels. Girl's death attracted attention. Argos growled softly. Cassian pressed his hand to the dog's neck, silencing him. His heart pounded as footsteps approached the door. "Everything all right, officer?" Cassian turned to find Cooper watching him, eyes sharp despite his slouched posture. "Yes, sir. Thought I heard something suspicious, but it was just the catering staff." "Better check the perimeter then, outside." Cooper's tone made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. "Yes, sir." Cassian moved toward the main entrance, keeping his pace unhurried. He could feel multiple sets of eyes tracking him. Cooper, Willoughby, others he couldn't identify. The night air hit his face like a slap. He walked Argos around the building's exterior, mentally mapping cameras and security positions. The back service entrance looked promising, less monitored, close to where delivery trucks would park. "Time to go, boy," he said quietly. They'd pushed their luck far enough tonight. As they headed for his patrol car, Argos suddenly stiffened. A moment later, Cassian heard the crunch of gravel behind them. "Officer Rourke," Willoughby's voice carried clearly in the quiet lot. A word. Cassian turned slowly. Willoughby stood flanked by two men, the security figure from earlier and another equally professional-looking one. Both had suspicious bulges under their jackets. "I wanted to personally thank you for your service tonight." Willoughby's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And to extend an invitation. My foundation is always looking to support law enforcement. The right officers can find excellent opportunities for advancement." The threat and bribe wrapped in one neat package. "Thank you, sir, but I'm happy where I am." "Are you? A K-9 officer with your experience could be doing so much more. Leading the unit, perhaps, with the right recommendations. Think about it." Cassian nodded stiffly and got into his car. Argos jumped into the back, hackles still raised. Through the windshield, Cassian watched the three men return to the mansion. Only when they disappeared inside did he let out a shaky breath. He'd gotten what he came for, confirmation of the network's key players and proof they were rattled by recent events. But they'd made it equally clear they had him on their radar. The game had changed tonight. There would be no more chances to play it safe. Cassian's fingers hovered over his phone, Juniper's number displayed on the screen. 3 years of minimal contact made this call feel like defusing a bomb. He glanced at Argos, who sat watching him with those knowing eyes. Yeah, I know," he muttered. "Can't put it off forever." The phone rang 4 times before Juniper answered. "Dad?" Her voice, caught between surprise and suspicion, made his chest tight. "Hey, kiddo, got a minute?" "Is something wrong?" "Not exactly. I need your help with something. Could we meet?" A long pause followed. "The coffee shop on Mason Street. 30 minutes. Cassian arrived early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of both exits. Argos settled at his feet, alert but relaxed. When Juniper walked in, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, Cassian's breath caught at how grown up she looked. She slid into the seat across from him, eyes moving between him and Argos. "This must be serious if you're breaking radio silence." "Junie, don't. We both know you only reach out when you need something." The barista approached, and they ordered, black coffee for him, chai latte for her, just like her mother used to drink. "You're right," Cassian said once they were alone. "I haven't been there, but this is important. Lives are at stake." He explained about the dying girl, the recorder, the Willoughby connection. Juniper's expression shifted from skeptical to focused as he talked. "So why come to me?" she asked. "Because you're smarter than me with technology, and because—" He took a breath. "Because I trust you." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "That's not fair." "I know, but it's true." "What exactly do you need?" "Help analyzing the recorder's data, looking for patterns, connections, things I might miss. Bishop's good, but he's old school like me." Juniper leaned back, studying him. "Mom would kill you if she knew you were involving me in something dangerous." "You're 17 now, old enough to make your own choices?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "First time you've acknowledged that." They spent the next hour reviewing what he'd found so far. Juniper asked sharp questions, took detailed notes on her phone. When she pulled up social media profiles of key suspects, Cassian saw his own investigative instincts reflected in her methods. "We'll need a secure way to communicate," she said. "I can set up encrypted channels, and you should start recording everything. Conversations, surveillance. Build a digital trail." "Already ahead of you there." He patted his chest where a small recorder now lived. "Bishop's idea." Juniper nodded approvingly. "Good. Now about Argos. You said the girl gave him some kind of signal?" "A tap behind his ear. He's never reacted like that before." "Show me." They moved to a small park nearby. Cassian demonstrated the spot where the girl had touched Argos, describing the dog's response. "It's like she knew him," Cassian said, "but that's impossible." "Maybe not." Juniper pulled up something on her phone. "There was a youth therapy program at the shelter last year. They used trained dogs, including police canines. Look." The photo showed a group of teens with various service dogs. In the background, partially cropped, was Argos. "I remember that day," Cassian said softly. "They borrowed him for demonstrations. You think she was there? Worth checking the program records? If she knew Argos, knew he was trained?" Juniper's eyes lit up with the thrill of connection-making. Over the next few hours, they developed a plan. Juniper would dig into digital records while Cassian and Bishop worked their contacts. They'd meet weekly at the coffee shop, using shopping trips as cover. "I'll train Argos to respond to that signal," Cassian said. "If it meant something to her, it could lead us somewhere." "Be careful," Juniper warned. "They're already watching you." "I know. You too, don't take any risks. If something feels wrong, I'll call you." She stood, hesitating. "Dad? Thanks for trusting me with this." He stood too, fighting the urge to hug her. "Thanks for listening." Back home, Cassian began working with Argos. The dog picked up the new command quickly. A tap behind the ear now triggered an intense search response. Whatever the girl had intended, Argos understood. "Good boy," Cassian praised, offering a treat. "We'll figure it out." His phone buzzed, a message from Juniper through their new secure channel. "Found something interesting in the shelter records. Meet tomorrow?" He smiled, hope warming his chest. They were making progress, both with the case and with each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Argos pressed against his leg, tail wagging slightly. The dog had always been good at reading his moods. "Yeah," Cassian said, scratching behind those faithful ears. "Maybe we're not in this alone after all." The first blow came in the form of a letter. Cassian stared at the official courthouse stationery, his coffee growing cold beside him. The words "cease and desist" and "defamation" jumped out from the dense legal text. His phone buzzed. It was Juniper. "Dad, did you get one too?" "Yeah, Princess, you okay?" "They sent it to my school. Everyone saw the courier deliver it." Her voice cracked. "They're calling me a liar on social media. Someone leaked my name." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Stay home today. I'll handle this." But before he could move, Bishop called. Turn on the news. The local station showed flames leaping from the old shelter building, the one where they'd found records connecting the victim to Argos. Fire trucks surrounded the structure, but it was already too late. Convenient timing, Cassian muttered. There's more, Bishop said. Judge Carlton signed search warrants for both our homes. They're calling it a trafficking investigation, saying we're the suspects. Cassian grabbed his go-bag and whistled for Argos. Meet me at the spot we discussed. Bring Uni. He drove past Willoughby Hall, the sprawling mansion that housed the family's charitable foundation. Something caught Argos's attention. The dog's ears perked up, nose working overtime. What is it, boy? Cassian pulled over, letting Argos lead him around back. They found a cellar entrance, partially hidden by ornamental shrubs. The lock was new but showed recent scratches. We shouldn't, Cassian said. Argos whined, pawing at the door, the same reaction he'd had after the girl's signal. Quick look, Cassian decided, picking the lock with skills from his undercover days. 5 minutes. The cellar was vast, stretching under the mansion's east wing. Cassian clicked on his flashlight, noting filing cabinets and storage boxes. Everything seemed normal until Argos froze, hackles rising. That's when Cassian smelled it. Gas. The door slammed shut above them. Smoke began pouring through the ventilation system. Thick, chemical-laden smoke that burned his throat. Trap, he choked out, pulling his shirt over his nose. Argos barked, tugging him toward the far corner. Cassian followed, knowing the dog's superior senses were their best chance. They found a maintenance tunnel, but the grate was welded shut. The smoke grew thicker. Cassian's eyes burned, his lungs screaming for clean air. He fumbled for his phone but found no signal. Find a way, he wheezed to Argos. Search! The command triggered the dog's training. Argos bounded through the smoke, returning moments later to pull Cassian's sleeve. They stumbled through the darkness until they reached what felt like a coal chute. Old, rusted, but possibly their only chance. Cassian boosted Argos up first. The dog's weight caused the ancient metal to groan and shift. When Cassian pulled himself up, the whole thing threatened to collapse. Go, he ordered Argos, who was reluctant to leave him. The chute tilted sharply. Cassian's shoulders scraped raw against the metal as he inched upward, his vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. Just when he thought he couldn't hold on any longer, fresh air hit his face. Argos had somehow managed to force open the external cover. The dog's teeth clamped onto Cassian's jacket, helping drag him the final few feet. They collapsed on the mansion's back lawn, gulping clean air. Cassian heard shouts. Groundskeepers had spotted them. Run, he gasped. They made it to the car just as security vehicles rounded the corner. Cassian's hands shook as he started the engine, adrenaline and smoke inhalation making him dizzy. At their meeting spot, an abandoned ranger station deep in the state park, Juniper threw herself into his arms. You smell like smoke, she said, voice muffled against his chest. What happened? They tried to kill him is what happened, Bishop growled, emerging from the shadows. And they're not done. Look. He held up his phone. Social media was exploding with photos of Juniper, calling her an attention-seeking fraud. Her college acceptance had been mysteriously rescinded. Former friends were sharing private messages out of context. They're trying to destroy us, Juniper whispered. No, Cassian said, still hoarse from the smoke. They're trying to scare us, but they wouldn't go this far if we weren't close to something. Argos pressed against Juniper's leg, offering comfort like he had during those therapy sessions. A year ago. She scratched his ears, managing a weak smile. The girl knew, Cassian continued. She knew Argos from the shelter program. She knew he could lead us to evidence. Evidence that just went up in smoke, Bishop pointed out. Maybe not. Juniper pulled out her laptop. I backed up everything I found, and Dad's vest recorder was running in the cellar. They huddled around the screen, watching grainy footage of the files Cassian had glimpsed before the smoke hit. Juniper froze on a frame showing shipping manifests. There, she said. Same dates as the missing persons reports. Cassian coughed, his chest aching. They're getting desperate, sloppy. They're getting dangerous, Bishop corrected. You both need to disappear for a while. No. Juniper stood straighter, her voice firm. They want us to run, to look guilty. We stand our ground. Cassian studied his daughter, no longer the little girl he'd failed so often, but a strong young woman choosing to fight beside him. Pride mixed with fear in his chest. Argos nudged his hand, dark eyes knowing. The dog had saved his life today, just as he'd tried to save the girl who'd given him that final signal. We stand our ground, Cassian agreed. But we get smarter, more careful. They worked through the night, copying evidence, establishing alibis, building their case piece by piece. The smell of smoke lingered in Cassian's clothes, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. But looking at his small team, his daughter's determination, Bishop's steady experience, Argos's unwavering loyalty, he knew they'd already won something precious. They'd found their courage, their purpose, their trust in each other. The Willoughbys had tried to break them. Instead, they'd made them stronger. Cassian sat at his kitchen table, staring at the recorder in his hands, while Argos lay at his feet. Rain tapped against the windows, creating a gentle rhythm that contrasted with the tension in the room. Play it again, Bishop said, leaning forward in his chair. Juniper pressed play, and the girl's voice filled the room, weak but determined. My name is Sarah Townsend. If you're hearing this, I'm probably dead. Judge Malcolm Townsend is my uncle. He and the others, they made me keep quiet about what I saw. Cassian's hands tightened around his coffee mug. The judge, one of the most respected figures in the county, had been at every town meeting opposing their investigation. That's why she knew Argos, Juniper whispered, her face pale. She volunteered at the shelter program where Dad did the K9 demonstrations last year. On the recording, Sarah's voice cracked. I've been watching Cassian Rourke and his dog. They're good. They care. I'm leaving this where they'll find it. And I'm going to give Argos the signal we practiced, behind the ear, just like we did with the rescue dogs. Bishop pulled out a thick file. Sarah Townsend, 17. Reported missing 3 weeks ago, then suddenly found at a family cabin. The judge said she was going through a rebellious phase. She was gathering evidence, Cassian said, his voice rough. All those names, dates, shipping manifests, she was building a case against her own family. Argos whined softly, pressing closer to Cassian's leg. The dog remembered her. All those hours at the shelter, the gentle girl who'd spent time training with him while building trust. Listen to this part, Juniper said, fast-forwarding the recording. Sarah's voice grew stronger, more urgent. The Willoughbys aren't working alone. My uncle handles the legal cover-ups. The sheriff makes evidence disappear. But it's bigger than that. They're using the family foundation, the charitable donations, the overseas orphanages. It's all connected. Cassian stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. She knew she was in danger. The signal to Argos, the hidden recorder, she planned it all. Smart girl, Bishop murmured. She made sure the evidence would survive, even if she didn't. Juniper pulled up documents on her laptop. Look at these foundation records. Every time a girl disappeared locally, there was a corresponding adoption processed through one of the Willoughby overseas homes. Human trafficking disguised as charitable work, Cassian said, disgust clear in his voice. and the judge's own niece tried to stop it. The room fell silent except for the rain and Argos's steady breathing. The weight of Sarah's sacrifice hung heavy in the air. "She trusted us," Cassian finally said. "Trusted me and Argos to finish what she started." Bishop spread photos across the table, Sarah at charity events, standing beside her uncle, always slightly apart, always watching. She spent months documenting everything, must have been terrified the whole time. "They killed her for it," Juniper said, her voice shaking. "Her own family?" Cassian remembered Sarah's final moments, the deliberate way she'd reached for Argos, the peace in her eyes when the dog responded to her signal. She'd known she was dying, but she'd also known her plan had worked. "The judge," Bishop growled. "No wonder he's been pushing so hard to shut us down. It's not just about protecting the Willoughbys anymore. It's about covering up what he did to his own blood." Argos suddenly lifted his head, ears forward. A car door slammed outside. Juniper quickly gathered the files while Bishop moved to the window. "Black SUV," he reported. "2 men in suits." "Internal affairs," Cassian said grimly. "The judge must have called in favors." They had seconds to decide. Run? Hide the evidence? Stand their ground? Argos stood at attention, waiting for commands just as he had with Sarah. The thought of her courage steadied Cassian. "We don't run," he said firmly. Sarah didn't run. She faced them, gathered evidence, and made sure the truth would come out. Juniper nodded, straightening her shoulders. "They'll try to discredit us, just like they did to her. Let them try." Bishop moved away from the window. "We have what Sarah died to give us, proof of their corruption, all the way up to the judge himself." Heavy footsteps approached the front door. Argos growled softly, positioning himself between Cassian and the entrance. "Sarah knew the risks," Cassian said quietly. "She chose us, chose Argos, because she believed we'd see it through. Whatever happens next, we owe her that much." The knock came, sharp and official, but they were ready now. Sarah's final act of resistance had given them more than evidence. It had given them purpose. The girl who'd died fighting her own family had trusted them to finish her fight. They would not let her down. Cassian spread the maps across his kitchen table, coffee cup leaving rings on the worn wood. The GPS data from Sarah's phone shows she visited these 3 warehouses repeatedly. He traced the locations with his finger. All owned by shell companies linked to Willoughby Enterprises. Juniper leaned over his shoulder, her dark hair brushing his arm. "I've mapped their security systems," she said, pulling up diagrams on her laptop. "They're good, but there are blind spots here and here." She pointed to shadowed areas between camera ranges. The familiar tension crackled between them, the weight of years spent apart, now forced into close quarters by necessity. Cassian shifted away slightly, focusing on Argos instead. The German shepherd sat alert, watching them both with intelligent eyes. "We'll need more than just building access," Bishop said from his spot by the window. "These people are careful. They'll have layers of protection." Cassian nodded, pulling out Sarah's recorder. "That's why we're going to let them do the work for us." He pressed play, and Sarah's voice filled the room. "Weekly shipments arrive through Dover Holdings. Manager takes cash payments, no questions asked." "Dover Holdings," Juniper repeated, fingers flying across her keyboard. "Owned by Thomas Willoughby, the patriarch's younger brother." "The weak link," Bishop said with grim satisfaction. "Family black sheep, always trying to prove himself." Cassian turned to Argos. "This is where you come in, boy." He pulled out a small GPS tracker, barely larger than a thumbnail. "We've been practicing for this." The dog's ears perked up, recognizing the training cue. They'd spent weeks working on stealth approaches, teaching Argos to plant devices without being noticed. "It's too dangerous," Juniper burst out. "If they catch him." "They won't," Cassian said firmly, though his heart clenched at the thought. Argos knows what he's doing. Sarah trusted him for a reason. The tension between father and daughter spiked again. Juniper's worry for Argos reflected her deeper fear, that she'd lose her father too, just when they were finally rebuilding their relationship. "Show her," Bishop suggested quietly. Cassian nodded. "Argos, demonstrate." The German shepherd moved silently to Bishop, who was wearing a suit jacket similar to Thomas Willoughby's usual attire. In one smooth motion, Argos brushed past him, appearing to simply sniff curiously. When he moved away, the tiny tracker was perfectly placed in a fold of fabric. "He'll get close to Thomas during his morning walk," Cassian explained. "Same park, same time every day. Rich people and their routines." "Then what?" Juniper asked, still uncertain. "Then we follow. Document meetings, photograph exchanges, build a case they can't bury." Cassian pulled out more equipment, tiny cameras, directional microphones. "We do this right, we can map their whole operation." Bishop nodded approvingly. "Small steps, careful documentation. No rushing and half-cocked." "Meanwhile," Juniper added, turning her laptop to show them, "I've been working on their financial records. There are patterns, large withdrawals before every adoption, money moving through offshore accounts." Cassian felt a surge of pride at her thoroughness, quickly followed by guilt. She shouldn't have to be involved in this dangerous game, but she'd chosen to stay, to fight alongside him, and he had to respect that decision. "We start tomorrow," he said. "Argos plants the tracker. We document Thomas's movements for 3 days. Then we move on to the warehouse surveillance." "What about the judge?" Bishop asked quietly. Cassian's jaw tightened. "We save him for last. He's Sarah's uncle. He'll be the most careful, the most paranoid. We need leverage first." They spent the next hour reviewing contingency plans, escape routes, emergency signals. Argos watched them intently, absorbing every detail. The dog's presence was reassuring, a steady reminder of Sarah's trust, of the responsibility they carried. "One more thing," Cassian said finally. He pulled out 3 burner phones. "We switch communications every 48 hours. No real names, no personal details." "Feels like a spy movie," Juniper muttered, but she took the phone. "These people killed Sarah," Bishop reminded her gently. "They'll do worse to us if they catch us." The room fell silent as that reality sank in. Cassian watched his daughter's face, seeing fear war with determination. She was so young, yet already caught up in something so dark. "We can stop," he offered quietly. "You can walk away, be safe." "No," Juniper's voice was firm. "Sarah was younger than me. She didn't get to walk away." Argos moved to her side, pressing against her leg in silent support. She scratched behind his ears, the same spot where Sarah had tapped her final signal. "Tomorrow, then," Bishop said, gathering his things. "We start small, we stay careful, we build our case. One piece at a time." Cassian nodded, already mentally reviewing Argos's training. The dog would have to be perfect. Their whole plan hinged on that first tracker placement. As Bishop left, Juniper lingered. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "I know we're not... things are still complicated," he offered with a slight smile. "Yeah." She met his eyes. "But I'm glad I'm here, that we're doing this together." The words hung between them, bridging years of distance. Cassian wanted to hug her, to promise everything would be okay. Instead, he simply nodded, respecting the fragile new trust they were building. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we start taking them down." She left, and Cassian turned to Argos. "Just you and me now, boy. Let's run through it one more time." The German Shepherd's eyes gleamed with intelligence as they began their final practice session. Tomorrow would bring danger, but tonight they had purpose, preparation, and the memory of a brave girl's trust to guide them. Their campaign against the Willoughbys was about to begin. The morning news blared across every station in Cedar Grove. Cassian watched the footage play out on the break room television, his coffee growing cold in his hands. Images of police cars surrounding Willoughby Enterprises flashed across the screen. Officers led handcuffed executives through the glass doors, while reporters thrust microphones toward their downturned faces. In a stunning development, the anchor announced, federal agents have frozen all assets belonging to Willoughby Enterprises following allegations of human trafficking. Sources say the investigation began after the mysterious death of a teenage girl 3 months ago. Argos sat alert at Cassian's feet, watching the screen with unusual intensity. Cassian reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, remembering Sarah's final gesture that had started it all. "You did good, boy," he murmured. "We both did." The break room door swung open as Bishop entered, looking more energetic than Cassian had seen him in weeks. "Turn it up," he said, grabbing the remote. "They're about to announce the numbers." The volume increased just as the anchor continued. Federal authorities have identified at least 27 victims connected to the trafficking ring. Documents indicate the operation spanned 5 states, with profits estimated in the millions. Thomas Willoughby and 4 other executives are currently in custody. 27 kids, Bishop breathed. And that's just what we know about so far. Cassian nodded grimly. Their careful documentation, GPS tracks, financial records, surveillance photos, had painted a picture too damning to ignore. Even the local police couldn't look away anymore. His phone buzzed. A text from Juniper. "Dad, turn on Channel 8. They're interviewing Sarah's parents." He quickly changed the channel. Sarah's mother stood before a forest of microphones, her husband's arm around her shoulders. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Our daughter tried to tell us something was wrong. We didn't listen. We trusted the wrong people, and she paid the price. But even in her final moments, she found a way to fight back. She chose someone she knew would listen." The camera panned to show a photo of Sarah. Young, bright-eyed, full of life. Cassian felt the familiar ache in his chest. He'd never spoken to her, never heard her voice, but her final act of courage had set everything in motion. A commotion in the hallway drew his attention. The sheriff, newly appointed after his predecessor's arrest, strode in, looking harried. "Rourke," he called, "the feds want to talk to you again. They're building their case against the judge." Cassian exchanged glances with Bishop. The judge, Sarah's uncle, had been notably absent from the initial arrests. His position and connections had bought him time, but the net was closing. "I'll be right there," Cassian replied. As the sheriff left, he turned to Bishop. "Keep an eye on things here. Something doesn't feel right." "Too easy?" Bishop asked quietly. "Thomas Willoughby didn't build an empire by being careless. These arrests, they feel like sacrificial pawns." Back at his desk, Cassian reviewed the evidence they'd gathered. The GPS trackers had revealed a network of properties, each carefully disguised as legitimate businesses. Financial records showed money flowing through dozens of shell companies. It was thorough, damning, and yet... "Dad!" Juniper burst into his office, laptop clutched to her chest. "You need to see this." She set up her computer, pulling up a series of documents. "I've been monitoring their offshore accounts. There's been activity, massive transfers, all within the last hour." Cassian leaned in, studying the numbers. "They're moving assets, but how? Everything's supposed to be frozen." These accounts weren't on the original warrant. They're hidden behind layers of encryption, registered to companies that don't exist on paper. She pointed to a string of transactions. Someone's preparing for something big. Before Cassian could respond, his phone rang. The federal agent in charge, Detective Martinez. "Rourke," Martinez said without preamble. "We just got a tip about a warehouse near the port. Looks like they're trying to move evidence. We're assembling a team—" "Wait," Cassian interrupted, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. "Which warehouse?" "Pier 17. Why?" "That's not one of theirs. We tracked every property. They never went near the port." He looked at Juniper's screen again, at the pattern of money movements. "It's a trap." "What are you talking about?" "They're not running scared, they're redirecting attention. While everyone's focused on the port, they'll be moving something else." Cassian's mind raced. "Check the airfield, the private terminal." A pause on the line. Then, "How sure are you?" "Sure enough to bet lives on it." Another pause. "I'll split the team. Keep this channel open." Cassian ended the call, already moving. "Juniper, keep tracking those accounts. Any unusual activity, call me immediately. Bishop—" He turned to find his friend already gearing up. "Right behind you," Bishop said. Argos fell into step beside them as they headed for the car. The morning's triumph felt distant now, replaced by a familiar tension. They'd won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The news still played on screens throughout the station, celebrating the apparent victory. But Cassian knew better. Thomas Willoughby was too smart, too connected to go down this easily. The frozen assets, the arrested executives, they were just the visible part of the iceberg. As they drove toward the airfield, Cassian's phone lit up with updates. More arrests downtown. Reporters swarming the Willoughby estate. Politicians making statements about justice and accountability. But somewhere in the shadows, the real power players were making their moves. The judge was still free. Thomas Willoughby's core assets were still flowing. And Sarah's killers, the ones who had actually ended her young life, remained unnamed. "We opened the door," Bishop said quietly from the passenger seat. "Now the real fight begins." Cassian nodded, watching Argos in the rearview mirror. The German shepherd sat alert, ready for whatever came next. Sarah had trusted them to finish what she started. The morning's victories were important, but they were just the beginning. The private airfield came into view ahead, its small terminal deceptively quiet in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in this game of shadows and money, justice for Sarah was waiting. They just had to keep pushing, keep following the trail she'd left them. One battle won. But the war for truth was far from over. Cassian stared at the television screen in disbelief as Judge Reynolds delivered his ruling. The courtroom feed showed Thomas Willoughby's lawyer wearing a satisfied smirk. "Due to irregularities in the chain of evidence," the judge announced, "this court has no choice but to exclude the following items from consideration." The list went on and on. GPS records, excluded. Financial documents, inadmissible. The recorder that started it all, tainted evidence. With each word, months of careful work crumbled. Beside him, Bishop swore softly. "They got to him. Somehow they got to the evidence clerk." Cassian's phone buzzed. A text from Martinez. "3 witnesses, no show. Can't locate them." The pit in his stomach grew deeper. They'd known this was coming, had tried to protect their sources, but Willoughby's reach proved longer than they'd anticipated. One by one, the people who'd agreed to testify were vanishing. Not dead, just gone. Relocated with new jobs, sudden family emergencies, or simply disappeared without a trace. "Dad?" Juniper's voice shook as she walked into his office. She held out her phone. The screen showed a photo of her leaving her apartment, taken that morning. Below it, a simple message. "Shame if something happened to her." Cassian's hands clenched into fists. Pack a bag, you're not staying there tonight. But no arguments, he turned to Bishop. Can you get her somewhere safe? Before Bishop could answer, 2 internal affairs officers appeared in the doorway. Detective Bishop, we need you to come, with us. Bishop's face remained calm, but Cassian saw the tension in his shoulders. What's this about? Evidence tampering. We have security footage showing you accessing the evidence locker last night. That's impossible, Cassian started, but Bishop held up a hand. It's okay. He stood slowly. They've been planning this move, probably doctored footage, but it'll take time to prove. He turned to Cassian. Don't do anything stupid. They want you to react. Cassian watched helplessly as his friend was led away. Within hours, Bishop's face was plastered across local news channels. Veteran detective arrested in corruption probe. The story painted him as a desperate man trying to frame innocent businessmen, suggesting he'd been paid to plant evidence. In the following days, everything unraveled with frightening speed. Juniper went into hiding, using skills she'd learned from Bishop to stay off the grid. Cassian couldn't even know where she was. It was safer that way. His daughter's last text simply read, "I love you. Stay alive." The prosecutions fell apart one by one. Judge Reynolds cited procedural issues, constitutional concerns, anything to dismiss charges or exclude evidence. Thomas Willoughby walked free, appearing on television to declare his innocence and thank the justice system for seeing through this unfortunate witch hunt. Cassian sat alone in his darkened living room, Argos's head resting on his knee. The dog hadn't left his side since Bishop's arrest, sensing his handler's distress. The recorder that started everything sat on his coffee table, now useless as evidence. Sarah's final gesture, her desperate attempt to expose the truth, seemed to mock him. They'd followed her clues, gathered proof, built what seemed like an airtight case. And still, the powerful stayed powerful, while good people paid the price for challenging them. His phone rang. Martinez again. They're suspending the investigation, the agent said without preamble. Orders from above. I'm being reassigned. They can't just... They can, and they did. Listen, Rourke. Watch your back. This goes higher than we thought. The line went dead. Cassian looked around his empty house, feeling the walls close in. Bishop in jail. Juniper in hiding. Witnesses vanished. Evidence suppressed. Everything they'd fought for, dismantled by people who saw justice as just another commodity to be bought and sold. A knock at his door made him tense. Argos growled low in his throat. Through the window, Cassian saw a manila envelope on his porch. He waited 10 minutes before retrieving it, checking carefully for surveillance. Inside was a single photograph. Sarah, alive, sitting in what looked like an expensive study. She was wearing the same clothes she'd died in. Behind her, partially visible in a mirror, stood Judge Reynolds. The message was clear. They wanted him to know just how deep the betrayal went, how hopeless his fight really was. Cassian sank into his chair, the weight of failure pressing down on him. Sarah had trusted them to finish what she started, and they'd let her down. The system she'd died fighting against had proven too strong, too entrenched to break. Argos whined softly, pressing against his leg. The dog's warmth was the only comfort left in a world that seemed to be collapsing around them. Somewhere out there, Juniper was alone, afraid. Bishop sat in a cell, framed for trying to do the right thing. And Thomas Willoughby's empire continued operating, destroying lives while hiding behind respectability and influence. For the first time since finding Sarah on that dark stretch of highway, Cassian wondered if justice was even possible. The truth wasn't enough, not when lies could be manufactured so easily, when power could reshape reality itself. He'd tried to fight the darkness and only succeeded in putting everyone he cared about in danger. The photograph trembled in his hands. Sarah's eyes seemed to stare directly at him, carrying the same desperate hope he'd seen in her final moments. But now, sitting alone in the gathering dark, Cassian had no answers for her. Only questions, and the bitter taste of defeat. Cassian spread documents across his kitchen table, organizing them into precise stacks. Each pile represented a different thread of evidence they'd gathered: financial records, witness statements, GPS data from trafficking routes. Argos lay alert at his feet, watching his handler's movements with keen interest. "We can't just present evidence anymore," Cassian muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "They'll find ways to suppress it, just like before." He picked up a report showing Thomas Willoughby's shell companies, then set it down again. "We need something they can't control. Something live, public, undeniable." His phone buzzed. An unknown number, but he recognized the pattern of rings. 2 short, 1 long. Their emergency signal. He answered immediately. "Dad?" Juniper's voice was quiet, but steady. "I'm coming back." His heart clenched. "It's not safe." "None of this is safe," she cut in. "But I found something. Something big. And I'm tired of hiding." 20 minutes later, she walked through his door. She looked thinner, harder somehow, but her eyes were bright with purpose. Argos bounded over to greet her, and she buried her face in his fur for a moment. "Look at this." She pulled out her laptop and opened it on the table, carefully shifting papers aside. "While I was gone, I did some digging into Judge Reynolds' financial records." Cassian leaned in as she pulled up spreadsheets and banking statements. "How did you get these?" "Let's just say I learned some new skills." She pointed to a series of transactions. "See these deposits? They're regular, but they don't match any legitimate income source, and they all trace back to offshore accounts linked to Willoughby subsidiaries." "Good work," Cassian said softly, pride mixing with concern. "But they'll just block this evidence like everything else. That's why we need to change the game." Juniper's fingers flew across the keyboard. "There's an oversight hearing next week. Public, televised. Judge Reynolds has to testify about the dismissed cases." Cassian straightened, his mind racing. "A live broadcast?" "Exactly. No way to suppress what happens in real time, in front of cameras and witnesses." They worked through the night, piecing together their strategy. Juniper coordinated with sympathetic journalists, ensuring multiple networks would cover the hearing. Cassian focused on Argos, refining commands and signals that would be crucial to their plan. "Remember how she tapped behind his ear?" Cassian demonstrated the gesture on Argos, who immediately went alert. Sarah knew what she was doing. She'd seen Argos work before, knew his training. "You think she planned this?" Juniper asked, watching them. "I think she left us tools. We just didn't understand them fully until now." He pulled out a small device, a modified clicker used in dog training. "Argos responds to specific patterns. Watch." He clicked twice, then once. Argos immediately began searching the room in a precise pattern, checking corners and hidden spaces. Another sequence of clicks, and the dog retrieved a specific envelope from among dozens scattered across the table. "Sarah knew about his evidence collection training," Cassian explained. "That's why she tapped that pattern. It's a command to find and preserve proof." Juniper's eyes widened. "And in a live hearing?" "They can't stop him from responding to commands. Can't claim the evidence is planted or tampered with if everyone sees him find it in real time." They spent the next days preparing meticulously. Juniper created a secure cloud backup of everything they'd gathered, set to automatically release to media outlets if anything happened to them. Cassian worked with Argos, ensuring the dog could perform complex tasks under pressure and distraction. The night before the hearing, they did a final review. Maps showed every entrance and exit to the courthouse. Timelines detailed when each piece of evidence would be revealed. Emergency protocols were in place if things went wrong. "You understand how dangerous this is?" Cassian asked his daughter. "If we fail—" "We won't." Juniper's voice was firm. "Sarah died trying to expose them. Bishop's in jail. How many other lives have they destroyed? This ends tomorrow." Cassian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the angry teenager who'd pulled away from him years ago, but a strong young woman willing to risk everything for justice. His throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for not being there before, for letting work come first." "Dad." She moved to hug him, and he held her tight. "We're here now. That's what matters." Argos padded over, pressing against their legs. Together they reviewed their final preparations. The evidence was organized into sealed packets, each marked with a specific scent Argos was trained to detect. The clicker commands were memorized. Backup plans had backup plans. "Once we start this," Cassian said, "there's no going back. They'll throw everything they have at us." Juniper squared her shoulders. "Good. Let them try." They worked late into the night, checking and double-checking every detail. The hearing would start at 9 a.m. sharp. Judge Reynolds would testify first, followed by other officials involved in the dismissed cases. They had one chance to break through the walls of power and privilege that had protected the guilty for so long. Cassian watched Argos go through his paces one final time, the dog's movements precise and confident. He thought of Sarah, dying alone on that dark highway, trusting them to finish what she'd started. Thought of Bishop, sitting in a cell because he dared to stand up for truth. "Get some rest," he told Juniper. "Tomorrow we show them what justice really looks like." She nodded, heading to the guest room. Cassian remained at the table, reviewing their plans one last time. Argos settled at his feet, alert and ready as always. Together they waited for dawn and whatever it would bring. The evidence was gathered. The strategy was set. Years of corruption and cruelty were about to face the harsh light of public exposure. Cassian touched the recorder that had started everything, Sarah's final gift, her last act of defiance against those who had silenced her. "We're ready," he whispered, and Argos's ears pricked forward, sensing his handler's resolve. The marble halls of the courthouse echoed with footsteps as Cassian, Juniper, and Argos made their way through security. The dog's nails clicked against the polished floor, his training collar equipped with the special mechanisms they'd prepared. "Remember," Cassian whispered to Juniper, "stay close to the exits. If anything goes wrong—" "I know, Dad. I've got the backup drive ready to stream everything." The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking. Judge Reynolds sat at the bench, his face a mask of professional detachment. But Cassian caught the slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled papers. Cassian took his position near the witness stand, Argos at perfect attention beside him. He spotted the unfamiliar faces scattered throughout the gallery, men with too straight postures and concealed bulges under their jackets. Hired muscle, waiting for orders. The hearing began with standard procedure. Judge Reynolds spoke about the dismissed trafficking cases, his voice steady as he described procedural irregularities and contaminated evidence, each lie built upon the last. Cassian's hand tightened on Argos's leash. The dog's ears twitched forward, sensing his tension. They waited for the perfect moment. "If there are no further questions," Judge Reynolds began. "Your Honor," Cassian stood, "I'd like to present new evidence regarding these cases." "The choice," Judge's face tightened. "This isn't an evidentiary hearing, Officer Rourke." "It concerns your niece, Sarah Reynolds." The name fell like a stone into still water. Ripples of whispers spread through the gallery. The judge's face went white, then red. "I will not allow—" Cassian pulled out the training clicker. 2 sharp clicks, then 1. Argos immediately began working the room in a precise pattern, nose to the ground. One of the suited men stood, moving to intercept the dog. Argos easily evaded him, continuing his search. Another man reached for something under his jacket. "Stop that animal immediately," Judge Reynolds thundered. Juniper's voice cut through the chaos. "The K-9 unit is performing a lawful search, Your Honor. Any interference would be obstruction of justice." The judge gestured sharply. 2 more men moved toward Cassian, but security officers stepped between them, hands on their weapons. The tension in the room crackled like electricity. Argos reached a section of wall paneling and gave a sharp bark. Before anyone could react, he pressed his nose against a specific spot. A hidden compartment popped open. "No!" The judge half rose from his seat. Inside the compartment was Sarah's recorder, the original they'd thought lost weeks ago. Argos retrieved it carefully in his teeth, patting back to Cassian. One of the hired men lunged, shoving past security. He grabbed for the recorder, but Argos danced away. The man drew a concealed weapon. Chaos erupted. People screamed and dove for cover. Security officers drew their guns. Juniper sprinted for the evidence, snatching it from Argos's mouth as the dog turned to face the threat. The armed man found himself suddenly facing 90 pounds of highly trained German Shepherd. Argos launched himself forward, taking the man down with precision. The weapon skittered across the floor. More of the judge's men moved in. Cassian met them head-on, years of K-9 unit training paying off as he fought to protect his daughter and his dog. Argos stayed close, a black blur of precision strikes and snarling deterrence. "The recorder!" Juniper shouted over the noise. She'd reached the court clerk's desk and plugged it into the audio system. "It's uploading." Judge Reynolds vaulted the bench, moving with desperate speed toward the controls. But he was too late. Sarah's voice filled the courthouse, crystal clear. "Uncle James, please, you know what they're doing to those girls. You have to stop them." "Be quiet and do as you're told. The Willoughbys own this town. Cross them, and you won't live to regret it." "Then I'll die telling the truth." The recording continued, laying out dates, names, locations. The judge's face crumpled as his own voice condemned him, describing payoffs and threats, the systematic suppression of evidence. The fighting stopped as everyone froze, listening. News cameras captured everything. Police officers poured in, responding to the disturbance. But now they heard the truth, too, and their loyalties shifted visibly. One of the hired men made a final desperate grab for Juniper. Argos was there instantly, positioning himself between them. The man backed away from bared teeth and blazing eyes. Sarah knew. Cassian addressed the stunned courtroom. "She knew you'd kill her for speaking out, so she left us the tools to finish what she started, left us a way to expose everything." Judge Reynolds sagged against his bench as officers approached with handcuffs. Around him, his hired muscle was being disarmed and detained. More police arrived, along with FBI agents who'd been monitoring the hearing. They moved quickly to secure the scene and collect evidence. The recorder continued playing, each revelation another nail in the coffin of corruption. Cassian pulled Juniper close, checking her for injuries. Argos pressed against their legs, still alert but calming as the threat level dropped. "She did it," Juniper whispered. "Sarah actually did it. She brought down the whole network." Through the courthouse windows, they could see news vans arriving, reporters running with cameras. The story was breaking wide open, too big to be buried this time. Cassian watched as Judge Reynolds was led away in handcuffs, the man's carefully constructed world crumbling around him. More arrests would follow. The Willoughbys, the corrupt sheriff, everyone who'd profited from suffering and silence. Argos sat at attention, watching the proceedings with alert eyes. Cassian knelt beside him, checking for injuries and finding only minor scrapes. The dog had performed flawlessly, just as Sarah must have known he would. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Good boy." In the days following the courthouse confrontation, justice moved with unprecedented speed. The evidence from Sarah's recorder, combined with the public nature of the exposure, made it impossible for anyone to suppress the truth any longer. Cassian stood at his living room window, watching news helicopters circle the Willoughby estate. FBI vehicles lined the curved driveway, while agents led out handcuffed figures: the patriarch, his sons, their inner circle. The family's carefully maintained facade crumbled under the weight of evidence. "They're saying it's the biggest trafficking bust in state history," Juniper said, joining him at the window. She held out a cup of coffee, which he gratefully accepted. "Sarah knew exactly what she was doing," Cassian replied softly. "Every name, every date, every transaction. She documented it all. She made sure the truth couldn't be buried again." Across town, similar scenes played out as corrupt officials were arrested. The sheriff who'd dismissed Cassian's initial reports, the prosecutor who'd buried evidence, even lower-level enablers who'd looked the other way for years. Argos lay on his bed nearby, head up and alert. Since the courthouse, he'd barely left their side. The bond between them had deepened through shared danger and triumph. "I keep thinking about her final moments," Juniper said, her voice catching. "How much courage it took, knowing she was dying, to make sure that signal reached exactly the right person." Cassian put an arm around his daughter's shoulders. The gesture felt natural now, where once it would have been awkward. She chose Argos because she knew his training would be crucial, and she chose us because she believed we'd see it through. Their phones buzzed simultaneously, another news alert. The judge had accepted a plea deal, turning state's evidence against the entire network. His testimony would ensure no one escaped justice this time. Juniper leaned against her father's shoulder. "Remember when we could barely be in the same room? Now look at us, taking down corruption together." "I'm sorry for all the years I was distant," Cassian said. "This case showed me what really matters. I nearly lost you in that courthouse fight." "But you didn't," she interrupted. "We're stronger now, like Sarah's recorder. The truth finally came out." They watched as more news vans arrived at the Willoughby estate. Reporters clustered around FBI spokespeople as they detailed the scale of the operation. Dozens of victims freed, multiple safe houses discovered, offshore accounts frozen. "The foundation's starting to get donations," Juniper mentioned. They had established a support fund for trafficking survivors, naming it after Sarah. "People want to help ensure this never happens again." Cassian nodded. "Bishop called earlier. He's been reinstated with full honors, and they're reviewing every case the judge ever touched. Real justice this time." Argos's ears perked up at approaching footsteps. A moment later, the doorbell rang. It was another survivor coming forward now that it was safe. They'd been arriving steadily, each with their own story to tell. "I'll get it," Juniper said. "You know, Dad, we make a pretty good team." Cassian smiled, watching his daughter move confidently to answer the door. She had grown so much through this ordeal, finding her strength and purpose. Their relationship had been transformed through shared purpose and danger. As Juniper welcomed their visitor, Cassian knelt beside Argos, scratching behind his ears, the same spot where Sarah had tapped that fateful night. The dog's eyes met his, full of unwavering loyalty. "You did good, boy," he whispered. "You did real good." Outside, more news helicopters circled, documenting the fall of the powerful who had thought themselves untouchable. But inside this room, there was something more precious. The quiet triumph of truth over silence, of justice over corruption, and of love restored through courage and sacrifice. Sarah's final gesture had set it all in motion, a dying girl's determination to protect others even when she couldn't save herself. Through her choice of messenger and messenger, she had sparked not just systemic change, but personal redemption. The visitor Juniper led in was young, scared but determined. Like Sarah, she had a story that needed telling. And like Sarah, she had found people who would listen and act. This was how real change happened, Cassian realized. Not all at once, but person by person, truth by truth, until the light finally overcame the darkness.